Happy NHL Draft Day, everybody. We have a huge trade to talk about, as well as some smaller deals that happened over the last couple of days. I think from this point on, any other trades that happened today, I'm just going to give my thoughts on them in my NHL Draft first round review video, which will probably end up going up very late tonight, assuming the first round of the draft goes 4 or 5 hours like it usually does. So let's dive into this blockbuster trade. The Montreal Canadiens have acquired defenseman Noah Dobson from the New York Islanders in exchange for the 16th and 17th overall picks in tonight's draft, as well as forward Emil Heineman. And as part of this trade, Noah Dobson has signed an 8-year contract extension with an AAV of $9.5 million. So let's start off by talking about this trade for the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm not going to lie, I absolutely love this move for them. I like the fact that the Canadiens front office are being very aggressive in looking to continue to improve this roster and build off of the season that they just had, where they made the playoffs and were one of the more surprising teams in the league. They already have their core foundational pieces in guys like Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, Juraj Slafkovsky, Ivan Demidov, and Lane Hutson. I'm sure Montreal would have gotten decent prospects with the 16th and 17th overall picks had they elected to keep those picks, but at the end of the day, the players that Montreal would have drafted in those spots probably wouldn't be ready to contribute at the NHL level for at least 2 to 3 years. And this past season, I think the Canadiens core showed that they are ready to start contending now. So I think it was a really smart move by the Canadiens to package those two picks together to bring in a win-now player in Noah Dobson, who's going to come in and make the Canadiens a better team right away, who is also still just 25 years old and fits right in that age group with a lot of the Montreal Canadiens core pieces that they already have in place that I mentioned earlier. Sure, Dobson is coming off of a down season, and there's definitely some concerns about the defensive aspect of his game. I feel like he's kind of similar to Evan Bouchard in that sense, where if you look at his defensive analytics as a whole, they're actually pretty decent, but he just has these defensive lapses here and there that sometimes lead directly to goals that stick out like a sore thumb that kind of gives him the reputation of not being a good defensive player. But when it comes to a player like Noah Dobson, you live with that because the offensive upside is so high. This is a guy who's only 1 year removed from a 70-point season. At the time, he was viewed as somebody who could potentially be a future Norris Trophy winner. At his best, Noah Dobson is capable of being a legit number one defenseman, and he should really solidify Montreal's right side. When the Canadiens selected David Reinbacher 5th overall in 2023, I think the hope and the expectation was he would be their number one right shot defenseman for a very long time. However, since being drafted, it's obviously been a bit of a bumpy road for David Reinbacher as he hasn't been able to stay healthy. So by making a trade like this, I feel like it takes a lot of pressure off of him. Now let's say if he just becomes a really good second pairing defenseman, that's fine because you have a guy like Noah Dobson now. This trade should also allow Montreal to play Lane Hutson on his strong side full time. He played a lot of right side last season, but I feel like it was kind of out of necessity because Montreal's right side was so weak. But ideally long term, you want a guy like Lane Hutson playing on his strong side, which is the left side. Really just cannot say enough good things about this trade for the Montreal Canadiens. I have seen some people saying $9.5 million per season is too much for Noah Dobson, but just take a look at this chart. I think this is a contract that is going to age just fine with how the NHL salary cap is projected to rise in the coming years. And I mean, if Noah Dobson can get back to playing at the level he played at in the 2023-24 season consistently, then I honestly think this contract could turn out to be a steal. Shifting focus now and talking about this trade for the Islanders, I feel like it's honestly kind of difficult to give my opinion on this return for the Islanders right now because the expectation is that New York is going to try and package these two first-round draft picks together to gain an additional pick in the top 10 and select James Higgins. And if they're able to pull that off and they walk out of the 2025 NHL draft with Matthew Schaefer and James Higgins, I don't see how anybody can look at this trade and call it a bad move for the Islanders. I think Islanders fans should be thrilled over the fact that this team is now finally starting to focus on the future. I mean, the turnaround that this organization has had over the last year and a half has been pretty insane. A year and a half ago, they were a team stuck in mediocrity with an older roster, not a great prospect pool, overall the future just looked really bleak. Fast forward to now, and the Islanders' future honestly looks very bright. They were able to draft Cole Yzerman last year, a pick that a lot of people think could turn out to be a steal. They got great value moving on from Brock Nelson at the trade deadline, not only getting Colorado's top prospect in Callum Ritchie, but also an additional first-round draft pick. And then they obviously got some lottery luck, landing the first overall pick in this year's draft, and now thanks to this trade have 2 more additional first-round draft picks in this year's draft, which again, a lot of people are expecting them to try and package together to move up into the top 10 and select James Haggins after using the first overall pick on Schaefer. Now it goes without saying, but I think if the Islanders aren't able to use these 2 picks to move up and select Haggins, then this return doesn't look as great. This is a draft that's viewed as a bit of a top-heavy draft. You're probably not going to get a top-pairing defenseman or a legit top-line forward with the 16th or 17th overall picks. And before I forget to talk about him, on top of the 2 first-round picks, the Islanders are also receiving Emil Heineman, who is a 23-year-old forward, currently a restricted free agent, played 4th-line minutes for the Canadiens this past season for the most part, but I do feel like there's quite a bit to like about his game. He's fast, he's physical, and he's very good defensively. Not really a whole lot of offensive upside there, but he should be a pretty solid addition to the Islanders' bottom 6. So those are my thoughts on the Noah Dobson trade. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, especially if you are a fan of either the Canadiens or the Islanders. Sound off down below in the comments. Let me know how you're feeling. But before I get out of here, there are some more smaller trades that I wanted to give my thoughts on that happened over the last couple of days. First up, the Seattle Kraken have acquired Freddy Gro from the Minnesota Wild in exchange for a 4th-round pick in this year's draft. Not really a whole lot to break down when it comes to this trade. It feels just like a pure cap dump for the Minnesota Wild. Freddy Gro has 3 more years left on his deal at a cap of $2.1 million. There was no salary retention at all as part of this trade. And for the Kraken, you get a player in Freddy Gro who definitely has some finishing touch. He had 18 goals in 82 games this season, as well as 19 goals in 82 games back in the 2022-23 season. He's definitely not a defensive specialist, and he isn't a guy who's going to drive play all that much either, but he could end up being a solid option for Seattle as a number 4 center behind Beniers, Stevenson, and Wright. Moving on now to the next minor trade that happened, the Florida Panthers have acquired goaltender Denil Terasov from the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a 2025 5th-round draft pick. So it looks like the Florida Panthers have their backup goaltender for next season, which is something that they had to address as both Kaapo Kähkönen and Vitek Vanacek are pending UFAs. Terasov is currently a restricted free agent. I imagine he's just going to end up signing a very cheap 1 or 2 year deal with the Panthers. He is a guy who has had some stretches of strong play at the NHL level, but ultimately he's probably not someone who's going to have to play all that much for the Panthers as long as Bob stays healthy. And for the Blue Jackets, Jet Greaves is definitely somebody who kind of passed over Terasov on the depth chart with the way he performed this past season, and they obviously still have Merzlikins under contract for a couple of seasons. It's not looking like they're going to buy him out, and it probably wouldn't be the easiest contract to move, so it makes sense to move on from a guy like Terasov if Merzlikins and Greaves are going to be your guys heading into next season. And now finally finishing up this video with a trade that is an absolute head scratcher. The Washington Capitals have acquired Justin Sordiff from the Florida Panthers in exchange for a 2026 second-round draft pick and a 2027 6th-round pick. Justin Sordiff was a 3rd-round selection by the Panthers back in 2020. He's already 23 years old and has only played 4 NHL games up until this point, and it's not like he's been lighting the world on fire in the American Hockey League either. He finished this past season 6th in scoring on the Charlotte Checkers. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I watch a whole lot of American Hockey League games because I don't. So Sordiff isn't really a guy I'm all that familiar with, but just from a pure value standpoint, this feels like a lot to give up for somebody with his resume. Obviously, the Washington Capitals see something in him or they wouldn't have gone out and made a trade like this, so we'll see if they make us all look stupid and Sordiff becomes an impactful player for them. But man, for the Panthers, a team who don't really have a ton of draft picks in the coming years, I feel like this is a fantastic move for them. So that is going to wrap up today's video going over the blockbuster trade that sent Noah Dobson to the Montreal Canadiens, as well as some other minor deals that happened over the last few days. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, any other trades that happen from this point on, I'll give my thoughts on in my NHL Draft first round review video, which you can expect probably late tonight depending on how long the draft goes. If you made it all this way to the end of this video, be sure to leave a like. It's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.